You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, and before we jump in, just want to say that SAVA, the World Small Animal Congress, was a lot of fun, Sean. So I had a good time in Portugal. Lovely people, a lot of innovation talks, and I was really privileged to be invited to with you to run the innovation stream there. So that was really cool.
Yeah, it was amazing, wasn't it? All of the Purina startup companies and the pitch competition and all of those lovely Portuguese people and the wonderful Portuguese food. Holy moly. Yeah, I'm ready to go back.
That was good. But we're excited to have our guest today. So we have Ryan Gallagher. He is an engineer by training, a founder by nature, and a lover of working hard for an important mission. Ryan started Scribenote to help his sister Katie get home on time from the clinic. He hopes that Scribenote can one day make the paperwork part of non existent. So, Ryan, welcome to the show. I'm very excited. Sounds like we're going to talk about Sean's competitor. Is that the case? Tell me more. What are you doing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. So thank you both for inviting me. I guess maybe that's a good place to start. Sean, Talkative, and Scribenote do kind of fill a similar niche in the veterinary industry. And I just want to start out by saying, like, it's very rare that competitors ever try to help each other. And so extending your platform here with the Veterinary Innovation Podcast is really appreciated. And I think it does speak to the fact that the show is about innovation, whether there's competitive dynamics or not. It's really about innovation in the veterinary industry. And I think that's really awesome. That said, that might be a reason that we can't divulge certain information in this show, but happy to talk about everything we can. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think the thing that I would say, Brian, is the pie is really big and the problem is huge. And I think having a bunch of people work in different ways to solve the same problem ultimately helps the industry. And when me and Ivan started this podcast 4 years ago, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to help this industry. We're passionate supporters about it. And having conversations with people, whether they're competitive or non-competitive, makes it a better place to work this pet health industry. So let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about what Scribenote is and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so Scribenote is completely automatic medical records for veterinarians. Scribenote essentially allows the practitioner to walk into the exam room, ask consent to record the appointment, and then they can just click a button on their phone, computer, tablet, you name it. And from there, they just carry on the consultation as usual. That Scribenote kind of sits in the corner of the exam room, passively listening to the conversation. It's important to note here that you should obtain client consent before you begin recording, of course. But anyway, Scribenote just sits there listening to the appointment. And when the appointment's completed, all you have to do is click a button. 2 minutes later, you get back a fully formatted medical record in the SOAP format for the doctor to review and then bring into their PIM system. So the end result is, instead of typing your record or dictating your record, Scribenote's actually like having a scribe in the room, but it's an AI-based scribe, and it's always there, always ready to help you.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting because that's something that I'm about to open a clinic, and I'm actually we just talked with Sean about this. Is there software? And I know that there's a lot of initiatives now with the AI platforms that we have. You mentioned something. I'll ask a question as the clinician. When you were saying the soap notes, I'm thinking about the dinosaurs that we're entering the medical records in, such as Avimark and Cornerstone and everything else. The soap notes are in different sections in terms of subjective, objective, assessment and plan. And then obviously in the exam room, you're not dipping into probably assessment and plan. But so are you really focusing on that initial subjective portion of it? And then how do you get it into the medical records? Is it like a copy paste, or are you trying to integrate with them? Just from the workflow perspective, I think it's brilliant. I think it's great, but just how do you improve that piece of kind of getting it to the right place and the right sections to the right place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a couple things there. We do generate a full SOAP for every appointment. The details that are probably the most sparse is the assessment section, vast majority of the time, because that might be not the most articulated section of the appointment. But certainly the meat and potatoes of creating a SOAP note, the subjective, the plan, that gets picked up extremely well, just baseline. In any given exam conversation, the subjective and the plan generally take a ton of time to rewrite, and it's very much rote work, right? It's repeating exactly what you just talked about in the appointment, and then having to go fill that out again if you were writing it yourself. And so Scribenote certainly captures the S and P very well, but and same with the objective and assessment. But there is some things to note on those, like the O and the A section. Yeah, so objective is kind of the one change in workflow for most practitioners using Scribenote. Like if you aren't articulating through your physical exam, then we don't pick it up, right? So if you don't go through and say, oh, his temperature is this today, and we noticed that he weighs this, then Scribenote's not going to pick it up. And we were actually kind of worried about that when we were doing our beta testing. We thought that that would be sort of something that held practitioners back from using Scribenote. But one of the things we've heard resoundingly from our customers is that articulating through the physical exam works really well in a couple senses, where number one, your note is now getting generated. and then number two, you're increasing the rapport in the room. I have a friend's dad who once told me that, oh, veterinarians make too much money. All they do is walk in and pet the dog and then leave, right? And that is so far from the truth as to what's happening during that physical exam, and having that articulation at the point of care, it's another opportunity to kind of build that understanding of what's happening on the veterinarian's end. So that's kind of one of the workflow changes in appointment. And then to answer your question, after appointment, so after the SOAP's been generated, what all of our customers are doing to date is one of two manual workflows that they can do themselves, or they can export to other members of the care team to do for them. And so right now it's copy paste, or it's download the record as a PDF and then just drag and drop. And so, yeah, you're right. In systems where there's like 10 or 15 different subfields that you have to fill into, it's slightly clunkier, but certainly just copying over the S, A, and P in any case, you're down like 80% of the time you would have spent writing the record anyway. And so even in those systems where there's a lot to copy over, we do pretty well. Of course, integration is a big piece of where we're going. We're talking to several major vendors in this space right now with like very firm integration plans over the subsequent several months. But I guess another kind of like resounding piece of feedback is the veterinarian in the clinic is just so happy that they're taking this medical record time that used to take 10 minutes, and now it's going to take a minute to copy and paste and review the note, that the net time savings is still so much, in the green, that that the integration piece isn't an absolute necessity. It's certainly important, but it's not critical to make Scribenote very useful.
So brilliant. Thank you for walking us through that. I do think that, and that's just, from my experience of integrations, it's the path that never ends for softwares, and the challenge that you will face. And I don't know if, again, I'm not here to give you advice, but it sounds pretty simple if I have to ask my reception or technician to just copy paste, or comparing to how much money you're going to dump into trying to integrate into all kinds of, there's 86 softwares that were heard at the conference in the world, and then the enormous amount of money that you're going to invest into actually integrating. If you can not do that, I think that'll be much easier for you. But the interesting piece that you said, and I'm kind of comparing to what at the moment Shawn was doing, and I'm sure there's more development, but you are not dictation, you're actually summarizing it, and then essentially you're using AI model to do that. Did that come up? So I started hearing about this type of models when ChatGPT came out. Shawn, I think, introduced me to it. Use it all the time. I hate typing. I don't type very well. So is this using some engine like that on the back end? Is it ChatGPT or is it some other model? Again, if you think your competitors might be listening right now, you don't have to tell me that. But what is the sort of the under the hood and how that works, and what new advancements in the technology world allowed you to come up with the concept?
Yeah, certainly large language models, so the things that power ChatGPT, they play a critical role in where in what we're doing at Scribenote. But Scribenote was not we see this current wave of large language models, and we think we might be able to do something interesting. That's actually the opposite of what Scribenote has been historically. Scribenote, the first line of code was written in December 2019. And so we've been working on this for a very long time. And I can get into the story there if you're interested, but we've done 4 different product iterations to get where we are today. And so certainly the large language model trend has really accelerated Scribenote's pace, but this is not hey, here's an opportunity to use something cool. This is like what we've been focused on for the better part of 2 years, more than 2.5 years of full-time work, and more than I guess we're coming up on 4 years of Scribenote being an obsession, at least in a side project capacity.
Cool, cool, cool. So Ryan, it's interesting. You talked about, the path of integrations, and that was for us when we started talking to in 2019, around the same time actually, as Scribenote. That was one of the big hurdles, right? There's 86 plus or minus PIMs in the world, maybe more. I think when you look at, there was a few Portuguese ones that I had never heard about when we were at the conference. The vast majority of users, I would say probably somewhere around 90% of users, are still on legacy hardware that integration paths don't really exist that well, especially if you're looking at a read-write capacity. So what do you see that future look like? How do you guys get there? Sure, we can integrate with EasyVet and the web-based platforms that are out there. There's a lot more opportunities there. But what do you think of when you think of integrations, and why do you think they're so important?
Yeah, well, integration is all about just tightening that workflow up, right? And so Scribenote's entire existence is built around saving veterinarians time. And so everything we can do that is a step in that direction, everything that we can do to shave 20 seconds or 30 seconds off a documentation workflow, I think is an important step to take. Now, of course, we got to do it at the right price and at the right software abstraction layer, right? And so many of these vendors, they charge for customers to be able to integrate, and we'd be kind of selling our customers short if we just took the very first price to get any integration running, that customers could then get their notes done a little bit faster. I think so on our end, being diligent about when the right moment is to integrate. So like certainly when we're at the right scale where the economics work out well for our customers, I think that's an important thing that's on our horizon right now. And then, beyond that, integration, it really should, like Scribenote should be a seamless part of the veterinarian workflow. And right now that copy paste over, again, our customers are quite happy with it, but if you wanted to make the experience better, and that's like what all software providers should be doing every week, is looking at their software and saying, how can we get this 5% better? Because what you don't want to do is create software that we've solved the problem and then doesn't change for 10 years. I think that's a path to a lot of broken software and a lot of very frustrated veterinarians. And so in the name of, can we make things 5% better every week? I think integration is certainly on that path, and we have some ideas as to what that looks like. But yeah, we're working on it. We're working on a lot of things, though. We're working on making Scribenote as incredible as possible so that veterinarians can get home on time.
Yeah, it's a really worthwhile pursuit. So, this trend of large language models, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, we've been eating, breathing, and sleeping this for a really long time, you and me and lots of other people. One of the biggest challenge when it comes to large language models are hallucinations. Our service, Verify by Talk to, which you and me have chatted about offline, one of the things that we do is we use large language models, one that we developed ourselves, one that we developed in concert with Google, and it does a lot of our scribes' work. So, we're kind of like a more manual process than you guys are. You guys generate it automatically. We generate a SOAP note automatically, and then our scribes look at it. And the number one thing that they're looking for is hallucinations, because let's face it, people don't like their medical records to contain errors or things that they didn't say. So, how does Scribenote address those hallucinations to make sure they don't exist, or do they exist? And how do you talk to your customers about it?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
before you jump in, if I just may ask you to explain what hallucinations are, because a lot of listeners that probably,
Our listeners
well,
should know that because they listen to you all the time, and some of the things that you say doesn't make
I
sense,
also
Ivan.
think that some of your friends could be here, and knowing how they all like mushrooms, they might also think about that. So
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
let's dig into that.
Yeah, hallucinations are kind of like when you ask a 5-year-old to tell a story about the way the world works, and they might start off on the right track, like cars drive because the roads are on the ground, but then they get a little carried away in the details, and just start spewing, oh well, the cars can drive because magic, and they get carried away, and so that's what large language models are. They seem very magic, and I mean there's that. I believe it's a Douglas Adam quote about like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so certainly it feels very easy to look at a large language model and say this is magic, but what's really happening under the hood is a statistical prediction process that predicts the next word in a sequence of words, or more technically, the next token in a sequence of tokens, or just a piece of a word. And so, as a result of that, sometimes the statistics can lead the model astray, and make it say things that aren't quite true, or make it say things that aren't representative of the task at hand. And so, that is a big risk that anybody working with large language models is encountering today. If you're lucky, maybe not lucky, but you can engineer around a lot of things, and you can engineer resiliency into any system as long as you put the time and effort into making sure that those stopgaps are in place. This is one of the things about the large language model era, is it's very easy to stand up a compelling demo of any technology with large language model because they've done a huge chunk of the work, right? I like to look at it as like large language models have unlocked language for the next several million software developers, just like cell phones unlocked mobility and like ease of access to like services for the last generation of technology, right? But they haven't solved everything. They are still susceptible to errors, and I think that any technology that you build with requires the engineering team behind it to be well aware of what those are, put guardrails up in place, and then make sure that it's communicated. To your point, Shawn, it's communicated that there are potential areas for weakness, right? And trying to build around those, but not every time that works. It is worth noting, though, that any process in any scenario, I think we're really hard on technology. People forget their own note information too, right? Like, so Scribenote does, if our goal with Scribenote is we can get 95% of the work off your plate 95% of the time, then you're going to be so much happier than we are beforehand, right? And over time, we'll improve all the way to hopefully that 100%. But like, let's not forget, if you're a busy practitioner and you haven't gotten time to sit down and think about your records since 9 a.m. and it's 5:30 and you're catching up at the clinic, you might be prone to hallucinate, right? Like you might be a little prone to fill information that isn't quite true or misinformation. And so certainly the records with Scribenote, we've taken an extraordinary effort to make sure that large language model gaps are not present in the technology. And from what we hear, people really love it. But that is just something that the engineering team has to work with and work around.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I did a Chat GPT lab at the World Small Animal Forum, and
Which was really
one of
cool,
the
Shawn. It was
it was
amazing.
it was madness. I mean, imagine this for a second, Ryan. So I had 100 people, no, 200 people
200 people.
using ChatGPT in
A
the
lot of
same
them for
room
the first time.
together, and from different places in the world, speaking different languages. And it was chaos. It was 200 people in a room that was very, very loud. But one of the things that we were trying to do is to get the models to hallucinate. And so there was one person that raised their hand, and they had presented a case. It typed up a soap note. It was very beautiful. And then the veterinarian in the room said that the cat didn't have any kidneys and it was concerned how it was still alive. And it hallucinated in a really eloquent way. I think that's the biggest challenge that I see with LLMs and working with them every day is it's so amazing at telling lies that distinguishing the truth from the non-truth is very technically challenging, and it's very sneaky. It finds its way in very eloquent ways that unless you review the entirety of a note, whether that's programmatically or manually, you're still prone to see some of those. And one of the challenges that we've had right from inception is I talk to if we get 100% of what is said to our software correct, that's still often not enough. And the reason it's often not enough is people want to be seen as more intelligent of how they speak sometimes. And then often what the challenge is just perfecting it, just massaging it to the point where it's exactly what they want in their medical record. And this challenge of getting to 90% or 95% and not getting the 5% of the way, the rest of the way, is a non-starter for a lot of our mutual potential customers.
Yeah, I think I would push back on that a little bit. I think if you're working at the right layer of abstraction, then I think getting 95% of the way there is still such a massive leap in the right direction, right?
Couldn't
So
agree more with you on that statement. But it's what I found is that for some people, even that close is not good enough for them. They want perfection.
yeah, and I mean, this is just a trend with any technology, right? So if you like your notes to be perfectly exactly a way that only you could write, then you should probably keep writing your notes yourself, right? Because I like to think about this in like last generation technology thinking sometimes. And so, like, if you drove a horse regularly, or you rode a horse, I guess is the right word, regularly in the early 1900s, and then the car came around, and you said, like, wow, I really want to use a car. The problem is I can't fit my horse in the car. Then you're holding on to two different worlds, and it might impact your ability to move forward with efficiency gains in a big kind of like technological leap way. And so, we look at this internally a lot. We have a lot of people giving feedback that Scribenote is absolutely changing their life. And of course, we do get feedback that I would like it to be a little bit more medical, this terminology. I would like this to be a little bit different. And so we're building in tools that give people more leverage of what their record ends up looking like. But the thing that we focus on is that, like, if we take a step back and we look at the problem, veterinarians are some of the most incredible people in the workforce. They have an incredibly hard job. They spend hours a day doing work that doesn't really impact their happiness with the profession. It doesn't move the needle on what gives them meaning in their work. And then it's a massive efficiency sink, right? And so that's the administrative work of writing medical records. There's certainly a lot of other areas in the clinic. And so the thing that we keep just like obsessively focusing on is how can we maximize the number of messages that I got home to my son on time for the first time in 20 years, or maybe 10 years, if it's a young son. But I got home to my kids for the first time in a very long time. I had a lunch break for the first time in decades of practice. I finally feel like I can keep up with the workload. Like, that is our goal right now. And I think, like, everything that we should be focused on as a company is how do we get that out to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Because I haven't really talked about this yet, but the reason I started Scribenote is to help my sister, right? My sister Katie, back in December 2019, she was coming home from the clinic late 2 hours every day. And so I said, Katie, what is going on? There must be a problem here. So I followed her into her clinic. I'm a software guy by nature, so I was just seeing if there's something I could do efficiency wise. And what I saw was that 90% of the stuff that was keeping her late at the end of the day, that rote work of redocumenting exactly what she talked about, was already in the room. Like, the data is in the room at the point of the exam. And so if we can take 90% of that work off Katie's plate, and we take that time to write a single medical record down from 10 minutes to 1, then yeah, maybe Katie will have to review the record. It's important. It's her record. Just as if she had a scribe, she'd have to review the record, or if she dictated or wrote it. But the important thing is that you're shifting the focus of the veterinarian's job to going back to the reason that they wanted to be a vet in the first place, right? Like, Katie wanted to be a vet since she was 5 years old. It was not to be chained to a keyboard, typing up records or dictating records or any of that. She wanted to practice. And so that's what I see our role is at Scribenote is, let's push the technology as far as we can for it to work well for everyone. But let's stay laser focused on all the people who really just don't want to be writing records, who know it's not the reason they practice. Just take it off their plate. And if there is some, tweaks or edits that they need to make to the record, the overwhelming feedback we get is like, I'm happy to do it. I'm not rewriting a record for 10 minutes every day, or multiple times a day. I'm acting as a reviewer. And, like, also it takes the mental burden off, right? Like that example from earlier, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., that's 20, oftentimes 20 cases of information sitting in someone's head, right? If we can take the vast majority of work of remembering all of that off somebody's mental bandwidth, then, like, what does that do for them when they go and review? It's like a breath of fresh air, right? Oh, I forgot I talked about that. Oh, like, I'm glad that got picked up, right? And so, is it perfect? Certainly not. I don't think there's technology on the planet that's perfect, but I think it's a massive step in the right direction.
Amen. And you guys are both doing it. So, with that, we're massively over time, although it's a very exciting topic. And we usually wrap up with 2 questions. So, Ryan, is there a book, TED Talk, YouTube video, or anything else that excited you recently that you would like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I guess it's not super recently, but there's a book called When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. I think that has been one of the most impactful books of my life. It's about a surgeon who's been training his entire life to help people. It's a real story, true story. He's been training his entire life to help people and practice medicine, and then he gets a terminal cancer diagnosis. And it's a profound book. It's very moving. But one of the big takeaways I took from it is like, this man found a profession that was so meaningful to him that even in the face of his own mortality, he still found a way to keep helping people. Like he found a way to get himself into the hospital to perform surgery. And I think that that is a thing I always come back to. Like I think our purpose here on earth is to find work that we find so compelling and so meaningful, and so helpful to the rest of humanity that we do it even in the face of our own demise. And so that book I cannot recommend enough. It's
Sounds like a good one.
incredible.
Ryan, last question. Another innovator in the vet space that you think we should have on the show?
Yeah, Adam Little, DVM, Dr. Adam Little. I think you had him on maybe early in the podcast history, but he's incredible. He's been a long time mentor, even since like the first time I reached out to him early 4 years ago about what Scribenote could be. He's just a ball of energy and excitement, and really wants to push the industry forward to innovation. And I think he's incredible.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.